The air smells like rust and wet concrete, and something older than both. You are standing in the middle of Pripyat, Ukraine, and the city is absolutely silent. Not the silence of early morning or a quiet neighborhood. This is the silence of abandonment so complete it has become physical. A weight pressing against your chest, a thickness that makes every breath feel slightly deliberate. The date is April 26, 1986, and 18 hours ago, reactor number 4 at the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant exploded with a force that no one in this city has yet been told about. The people who live here, nearly 50,000 of them, are still inside their apartments right now. They are sleeping, making coffee, sending their children outside to play in the spring morning. And you are locked inside this city with them, except you know something they do not. You know what is in the air. The gates at the city perimeter have been sealed by Soviet military authorities. There is no way out, not tonight. The evacuation order will not come for another 36 hours. And in those 36 hours, every person breathing the air of Pripyat is absorbing invisible particles of radioactive iodine, cesium, and strontium that will follow them for the rest of their lives. You are one of those people now. The clock is not on the wall. It is inside your body, and it started the moment you arrived. If you have made it this far and something in you has shifted, that is exactly what this channel exists for. Subscribe to Lost in History, not as a favor to us, but because you deserve to keep feeling this. Leave a like as well. It matters more than you think. Now, back to Pripyat. You did not arrive here by accident. You came because someone told you the situation was under control. That is the phrase that was used. Under control. It was used by engineers at the plant who were still standing near the reactor core at 2 in the morning of April 26, while pieces of burning graphite were scattered across the roof like smoldering coals dropped from a furnace nobody could name. It was used by plant director Viktor Bryukhanov, who sent a message to Moscow claiming the radiation levels near the reactor were around 3.6 Röntgen per hour, a reading that came from the only dosimeter on site that had not gone off scale. The dosimeters that had gone off scale, registering readings above 200 Röntgen per hour, were set aside. Their readings were described as faulty. The situation was under control. You are standing on Lenin Avenue, the main boulevard of Pripyat, and it is a genuinely beautiful city. That is the first thing that surprises you. You expected something grim, something visibly Soviet and oppressive. But Pripyat in 1986 is a model city. It was built specifically to house the workers and families of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and it was designed with an unusual degree of care for a Soviet urban project. Wide streets lined with trees that are just beginning to bud in the April cold, a modern culture center, an amusement park that was set to open on May 1st for the May Day celebrations, its Ferris wheels still waiting, its bumper cars still wrapped in plastic covers, supermarkets, a hotel, a river port, schools, a hospital, everything a small, proud, modern city needed. And everything is still here, operating, humming, alive. The ordinary rhythm of a Saturday morning carries on around you without interruption. The morning of April 26th is a Saturday, which means children are not in school. They are outside playing. You watch them from where you stand, and the knowledge of what you carry makes the scene almost unbearable to observe. Parents are sitting on benches in the warm spring air. Some people are on their balconies, drinking tea, leaning over railings to feel the sun. A wedding is taking place today in Pripyat, a real wedding, with flowers and photographs, and a celebration that will be remembered not for the joy of it, but for its timing. The dosimeter in your coat pocket is clicking. It has been clicking since you arrived. You have stopped looking at it because looking at it does not change anything. Here is what the science tells you about what is happening inside your body right now. Radioactive iodine 131, one of the primary isotopes released by the reactor explosion, has a half-life of approximately 8 days. When you inhale it or ingest it through contaminated food or water, it travels directly to your thyroid gland, which cannot distinguish between radioactive iodine and the regular iodine it needs to function. The thyroid absorbs it eagerly. Children are far more vulnerable than adults because their thyroids are smaller and more metabolically active, which means they concentrate the iodine at higher rates. The children you are watching play in the street outside are receiving doses to their thyroids that will, for thousands of them, result in thyroid cancer over the following decades. You know this. They do not. Their parents do not. The Soviet state knows something is wrong, but the decision has already been made at levels far above this city to manage the information before managing the crisis. And here is a question that has stayed with historians, scientists, and survivors ever since. A question worth pausing on before we go further into this day. If you had been one of the people in Pripyat that morning, and someone had come to you privately and told you the truth about what was in the air, would you have left on your own? Would you have grabbed your children and walked out of the city before any evacuation order, knowing you might be stopped at the perimeter, knowing you had no official permission, knowing you would be leaving your home behind permanently? Think about that honestly, not what you hope you would do. What you actually believe you would do when everything around you looks normal, and the only thing telling you to run is information that contradicts everything your government is telling you. Drop your answer in the comments below. We read every one of them, and this question does not have a simple answer. The hours pass in Pripyat the way hours pass in a city that does not yet know it is dying. Slowly, ordinarily. The fire at the reactor is visible from parts of the city at night. A faint glow on the horizon that some residents noticed in the early hours of April 26th and described as beautiful. A blue light, they said. An ethereal shimmer above the plant. What they were seeing was Cherenkov radiation, the faint luminescence produced when charged particles travel through a medium faster than light travels through that same medium. It is genuinely beautiful. It is also a visible sign of lethal radiation levels that no person should be anywhere near. The firefighters who were called to the plant in the first hours after the explosion did not know what they were walking into. They were told it was a roof fire, an ordinary industrial fire. They climbed onto the roof of the reactor building without protective equipment, some of them in just their regular uniforms, and they fought the fire the way they would fight any fire. Several of them were dead within weeks. Their bodies were so radioactive they had to be buried in lead-lined coffins sealed inside concrete vaults. You are not at the plant. You are in the city, which means your exposure is lower, but not safe, not remotely safe. The wind on April 26th is blowing from the plant toward the city, carrying a plume of radioactive particles at a height and concentration that varies block by block, minute by minute. Eating anything in Pripyat right now means ingesting contaminated food. Drinking water from the tap means ingesting contaminated water. Breathing means inhaling particles you cannot see, cannot smell, and cannot taste. The body has no alarm system for ionizing radiation. No pain, no signal, no warning. The damage is being done at the cellular level, to your DNA itself, quietly and without any sensation whatsoever. That is one of the most unsettling facts about radiation exposure. It does not feel like anything while it is happening. You could be receiving a lethal dose right now, and your body would register nothing except the ordinary sensation of being alive. By midday on April 26th, the Soviet authorities are beginning to feel the pressure of what they cannot contain. Reports are coming in from the plant. The initial story that the reactor core is intact and only the roof has been damaged is collapsing under the weight of evidence. Radiation readings taken in the surrounding area are not matching the official figures being reported to Moscow. The KGB has its own monitoring systems and its own chain of command, and the numbers being fed up through that chain are far more alarming than the numbers being given to the general public or even to the plant's own management. Internally, within the closed world of Soviet bureaucracy, there are people who know by noon on April 26th that this is not a roof fire. This is something without precedent in the history of nuclear power. Something that cannot be managed with the tools that have always managed Soviet problems before. You are sitting on a bench near the Pripyat Culture Center as the afternoon arrives. The dosimeter in your pocket is no longer just clicking. It is making a sound that has shifted in frequency, a tighter, faster rhythm that tells you the level around you has increased. You are trying to decide what to do with the information you have and the options you do not have. The gates are sealed. The military has been positioned at the roads leading out of the city. You have no vehicle, no official pass, and no authorization to leave. The Soviet system in 1986 is not one in which you simply decide to leave when the state has decided you will stay. The architecture of control in a closed Soviet city is not just physical, it is psychological. It is built into every assumption you have about how life works, who gives orders, and what happens to people who break those rules without permission. Defiance is not impossible. But it is not simple either. And it requires a kind of certainty about invisible danger that almost no one naturally possesses. What you do have is your own body and your own mind, and you begin to think about what the people of Pripyat did to protect themselves in those 36 hours before the official evacuation finally began. Some parents, mostly those who had family connections to the plant, or who overheard enough from neighbors who worked there, since sent their children away early, sometimes to grandparents in nearby villages, sometimes further. These were individual acts of quiet defiance against official silence, made by people operating on instinct and partial information rather than confirmed knowledge. Those children fared better in terms of radiation exposure than the ones who stayed. But the villages around Pripyat were also being contaminated by the same plume. And some of those children simply traded one form of exposure for a slightly less severe form, without ever knowing the full picture of what had been done to them. The Soviet evacuation of Pripyat finally began at 2 in the afternoon on April 27th, approximately 36 hours after the explosion. It was executed with remarkable speed once it began. More than 1,100 buses were assembled from across the Kiev region and driven into the city in a convoy that stretched across the landscape like something out of a wartime mobilization. The residents were told to bring only what they could carry for a 3-day absence. 3 days. That is what they were told. Most of them left their furniture, their photo albums, their televisions, their food in the refrigerator, their medicine on the bathroom shelf, their pets on the doorstep. They stood at bus stops with small bags and believed they would be back by the end of the week. They were never allowed to return. The city they left behind became the most famous ghost city in the world. A place where time stopped, not gradually, but all at once. Mid-sentence, mid-meal, mid-life. You are on one of those buses now. You found a seat near the middle. Around you, people are quiet in the way that crowds are quiet, when they do not yet understand the full scale of what is happening to them. There is an older woman across the aisle who is holding a small cactus in a ceramic pot. She has brought one plant. You do not know why that detail stays with you, but it does. A man near the front is reading a newspaper. A child is asleep against her mother's shoulder, her mouth slightly open, her breath slow and steady, and completely unaware of anything. The bus is moving through the streets of Pripyat, past the culture center and the hotel, and the amusement park with its unopened Ferris wheel. And none of the people on this bus will ever see any of it again, in the condition it is in right now. The exclusion zone around Chernobyl, established following the disaster, covers approximately 2,600 square kilometers and remains in place today. Within that zone, the city of Pripyat stands exactly as it was left in April 1986, degraded now by nearly 4 decades of weathering, structural collapse, and the slow reclamation of nature, but fundamentally unchanged in its layout, its contents, its frozen posture of interrupted life. The amusement park that never opened still stands. The Ferris wheel never carried a single passenger and likely never will. The bumper cars are still there, rusting under trees that have grown up through the cracked asphalt. The school buildings still contain children's drawings on the walls and open textbooks on desks and small shoes left in hallways by children who walked out of them one ordinary morning and never came back. The hospital in Pripyat, Hospital number 126, still holds in its basement the uniforms worn by the first firefighters on the night of the explosion. Uniforms so radioactive that visiting that basement today still requires a dosimeter and still produces readings that make experienced radiation safety workers pause. The long-term human cost of Chernobyl remains one of the most debated questions in the history of nuclear science. The official Soviet death toll attributed to the immediate disaster was 31 people. That number was never accepted by independent researchers. Studies conducted by international health organizations in the decades following the disaster have estimated the eventual death toll from radiation-related cancers in ranges that span from 4,000 to potentially tens of thousands of people, depending on the methodology used and the populations included in the study. The thyroid cancer cases alone, most of them among children who were in Pripyat or the surrounding region at the time of the explosion, numbered in the thousands across Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. The vast majority of those cases were treatable when caught early, but the treatments required surgeries and lifelong medication for people who had simply been living their lives in a city that was, by every measure they had ever been given, perfectly safe. The bus has left Pripyat now. You can see the city receding through the window. Its apartment towers pale against the afternoon sky. Its streets empty again the way they will remain for generations. You carry with you what you have absorbed, both physically and in the more permanent sense of understanding. Pripyat existed for 16 years before the disaster. It was built in 1970 as a symbol of Soviet progress, of the peaceful atom, of a future in which nuclear energy would power the world cleanly and endlessly. For 16 years, people were born there, married there, raised their children there, and believed in the future it represented. All of that belief, all of that ordinary human investment in a place and a life was ended in a single night by a combination of a flawed reactor design and a chain of human decisions made by people who were too afraid of what the truth would cost them to tell it clearly and in time. That is what stays with you now. Not the radiation, which is invisible, and which your body will manage or not manage in its own time and its own way. What stays with you is the knowledge of how much damage can be done by the distance between what is known and what is said. Chernobyl was not only a nuclear disaster, it was a failure of the structures that were supposed to protect people from exactly that kind of disaster. Structures built not from steel or concrete, but from honesty and accountability. And those are the structures that failed first, hours before the reactor itself gave way. The reactor broke because of physics. The people were left in the city because of fear. Those are two very different kinds of failure, and only one of them requires a reactor to cause it. You are beyond the perimeter now. The dosimeter in your pocket has slowed its rhythm. The air outside is different. Not clean, not entirely, but different. You breathe in slowly and let the breath go. Somewhere behind you, a city is learning to be a ghost. Somewhere in front of you, the world is continuing the way it always does, unaware of what is still arriving on the wind. And somewhere in the years ahead, some of the people who are on that bus with you will develop cancers that their doctors will connect or fail to connect to those 36 hours inside a city that was told it was safe until the buses came. This is lost in history. We bring you inside the moments that shaped the world, not as observers, but as witnesses who carry what they learn. If this story gave you something to think about, to feel, or to carry forward, then you already know where to find us next time. We will see you in the next story, and it will be worth every minute.